Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another test-driven JavaScript video. I'm recording this on October 18th, 2012, and I'm picking up a couple weeks after the last time we recorded. And in the last episode, I said that we were all done with Testacular, and I was sort of right. We have Testacular all working on all these browsers, and I just love it. But I was sort of wrong in that I didn't get Testacular running on Windows. And so this episode is a little addendum to talk about the oh my god horror I've been through getting this thing working on Windows. And some interesting things happen in there, so I'm going to show that to you. So hopefully this will be brief, but I didn't want to leave this out because I know some of you are on Windows and Testacular has some issues on Windows. It actually works pretty well overall, but there's some things. Let's just go through what's been going on here. The first thing is I said that I was going to set up an option so that you wouldn't have to have all of the browsers running all the time. And that's true. So just to remind you, if you're just picking up with this episode, what we've been doing is getting the ability to run our tests on the browser in actual real world browsers. And right now we're using all of these browsers here. And it's IE8, IE9, Safari, Chrome, Firefox, and of course iOS Safari. This is the iOS simulator. And we can run all these with a single command. This lints tests our server code, tests our client code, all with a single command. And it's great, except that it doesn't work on Windows yet. We'll get to that in a moment. So right here, if we turn off Chrome, this test will fail because it looks to make sure that all of our supported browsers were actually tested. Now that's actually a really good thing because it's really easy to get into a mode where you're just testing against one browser and then another. You finally go to test against, say, Internet Explorer and learn that all the work you've been doing is for nothing because it doesn't work on IE8 and you have to come up with a completely different strategy. Enforcing that we actually run on all the browsers all the time is a good thing. But sometimes you just want to test against one browser, or maybe you're in a situation like I am here where you've got people running the tests that aren't going to want to test on all the browsers. So for that circumstance, I added a command line parameter called loose equals true, which will now allow the build to succeed. It will warn you if a browser wasn't tested, but it won't fail. So that's the first thing I wanted to show you. That is fairly straightforward. It is inside of our code, inside of our Jake file, our build script, we've got test client, which actually runs the client-side test. So it loops through our list of supported browsers, which is here. This is a list of all the browsers we support. It loops through that, and then it says check if that browser was tested. That function returns true or false if that browser was tested. And we accumulate that into a browser missing. So that starts out false, no browser was missing, but if at any point any browser is missing, it flips to true and sticks there. We check that. If the browser is missing, we fail if we don't have the loose environment variable set. So that's how that works. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. So you've seen that. The other thing I've done since the last time I recorded is Firefox released a new update. So we're now running on Firefox 16. You can see that right here. So I updated the list of supported browsers here. The other thing I did was I upgraded to iOS 6.0. Apple released a new update for the Mountain Lion, and I put that in, which upgraded our iOS Safari to 6.0, which actually led to a little problem. The way we were distinguishing the two browsers before was that the one I had installed on the Mac was 6.0. The one I had installed on Safari was 5.1. Now they're the same thing. So I had to do something about that. And what I decided to do was I decided to actually change the Testacular code. I've submitted a patch to the Testacular folks. Yeah, I've submitted a pull request to them to include the OS in the browser name. And you can see those changes here. What I did was they have a little file called util, which converts the user agent string into this convenient little short name you see here. What I did is I just parsed out the browser name and added that to the results. And that's checked into the repository. It's not integrated. It's not out in a new version of Testacular yet. So I just modified the code in the actual WeWiki Paint repository. And that's really one of the real benefits of checking in your node modules, as you can do stuff like that. So now Testacular is reporting the browser, or the OS, as well as the browser. So in our supported browsers, I say iOS Safari and Mac Safari. That's something else that's happened. Also, I've upgraded to the latest 0.4.0 browser. And as I said, I've reported the browser OS. And then also, there was a problem with Windows in that Testacular was causing a rebuild problem with Windows. It turns out that if you install Testacular on the Mac and then check out on Windows and run npm rebuild, as we do, that causes errors. Now there's a new version of socket.io that fixes it. That's the current head of socket.io at GitHub, but that's not out yet and it's not integrated in Testacular. So what I did was I went in and I manually upgraded inside of Testacular's node modules directory. You can see here socket.io. I manually upgraded this by running this command right here. So that's in the repository too. Again, that's the advantage of having the node modules checked in. You guys get this repository. It will just work. You don't have to do anything fancy. But if you're facing this problem, that's how you solve it. And that's also in the recent lessons learned about Testacular that I put out. So that's done. I've been busy. There's also another problem with Windows, which is that Jake has a problem with exclude. It doesn't work properly on Windows. I do have an issue open for that. Doesn't look like I put it in this to-do list, but I believe I have an issue open on that. Basically, the file list inside of Jake doesn't work properly on Windows. So I fixed that. I've also factored out a method to run Testacular. That is here. It's no big deal. It just runs Testacular. And I've also made some improvements to the .gitignore file. I removed all the .bin folders from the repository because that was causing npm rebuild problems on Windows. I've added that to the integration checklist, and so I will be checking for files that need ignoring every time. So basically the issue here is that when you install something with npm, it builds platform-specific files and puts those in there. So if you're into your node modules tree. So if you're checking everything into Git, as I am, you have a good chance of checking those platform-specific files in as well. So that's kind of a trick. It's a flaw in npm, I think, the way that the fact that they put those right in the same tree. So what I'm doing is I've upgraded the integration checklist to do an npm rebuild on Windows and then look at the Git status to see if there's any files that were created and make sure that those are ignored. And that way these ignored files I'll be sure to ignore files into the repository at all times. I've also updated my end of episode checklist to make sure things work on Windows after every episode rather than saving them up like I did this time. All right, and we did that. Okay, so that's Windows. So that's it, right? Everything should work on Windows. Well, not exactly. So let's go ahead and get everything. No, the problem is that you'd think everything would work on Windows, but it doesn't because Testacular, well, let me see if I can show you. So we'll run the Testacular server. And we'll run IE8. This is all in Windows, of course. So we've got a browser captured. Now if we run Jake, even though we have IE8 captured, our build file tells us that IE8 was not tested. And that's because Testacular has an issue where its output doesn't show up in the build script on Windows. So we're capturing the standard out. That doesn't work on Windows, for Testacular only. I have been spending quite a bit of time on this. I've submitted an issue to the Testacular folks, and they fixed it, sort of. What they did was they changed Testacular so that it no longer does process.exit. So if you go into the Testacular source code and you look at the way the runner works, it no longer kills the process when Testacular is done running. And what that means is that now we can run Testacular directly. And this is important because for whatever reason, Testacular is not working as something that you shell out to on Windows. The output gets lost. There's no way to capture it in the browser. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this code, and we're going to replace it with our own runner. And I thought I'd do that on camera because there's some interesting things. I've done it once already, but I wanted to do it over again because there's some interesting things that come up. So what we're going to do is we're going to just run Testacular directly. And the way we do this is by requiring the Testacular runner, and calling the run method with a config. And then that takes a callback. And that callback has the exit code. And then if the exit code has a value, then that means that the tests failed. So rather than running Testacular by shelling out, we will actually run Testacular directly. So let's see if that works. Yeah, you can see that working there. And then if I break the tests, you should see it fail. Yeah, client test failed. So that's working great. The problem with this is that it works. Now we're running Testacular directly, which is really nice because it gives us a little bit more control. But the problem is Testacular is still not really designed to be called programmatically. So this information that we're getting here in our terminal about which browsers have run that we use in order to test for supported browsers, that's no longer available. And that's the tricky little thing I wanted to show you. There's something you can do that's somewhat unique to JavaScript because it's such a flexible language. We can actually capture the output ourselves. See, what happens is the runner writes to process.standardout.write. So what we can do is we can capture that process.standardout.write function and write our own. Now again, the reason we're doing this is because Testacular writes its output but doesn't give it to us. And what we need to do is we need to look at the output and look to see if the browsers we care about have been run. So we're going to override the standard process.standardout.write function with our own, like this. And we'll capture that into a variable. Call it output, initialize it with nothing, and then whatever data is written, we will store that off, and then we'll call the original one with all the arguments that were passed to us. So if we do this correctly, and then when we're done, of course, we want to put it back. We want to say process.standardout.write equals the old function, which we'll call old standardout. So if we did this right, we should be able to log our output. And then we'll see it show up here twice. Once from when it was running normally, and once from when we captured it. There. So now we have all the output in a string. That's a little bit crazy. We're capturing the standardout.write, overriding it with our own function, running our tests, and then putting everything back so we can look at the output. And now that we have that, we can put all the supported browser code back that we have here. Clean that up. So now, rather than shelling out to run Testacular, we are running it directly, capturing the standard out, and then we can check it. Now let's see if that works. It looks like it did. Let's turn one of these off. Perfect. Okay, so that works. Now we can check this in. Go over to our Windows machine, do a git pull and a jake, and now what we should see is, yes, it's no longer complaining about IE8 not being tested. That is working. So that is the Windows Addendum for Testacular. This episode went a little bit long, so I'm going to do the last little bit of integration off screen, but I wanted you to be able to see that. All the little things that have happened since the last episode, just sort of a grab bag of stuff. That's it for Testacular. It's now working on Windows. I have actually confirmed this, so I'm going to check this in, and next time we will finally get on to doing the actual WeWiki Paint code, and we're going to do that test driven. Thanks for watching, everybody. I will catch you next time.